Welcome one and all to the online learning platform at Department of Civil Engineering, BMS Institute of Technology and Management, Bangalore. I am Dr. Rajesh Gopinath and you are along with me for the course Environmental Protection and Management. Slide 4. If you recollect, in the previous session, we had discussed about zero discharge technology. In today's session, that is slide 5, we shall be understanding the concepts of Eco Management and Audit Scheme, popularly also coined as EMAS. Slide 6. In today's presentation, first I'll be introducing you to EMAS. I will list its core elements. I shall explain to you its basic structure and how one can go about implementing it. We shall understand the benefits associated with EMAS and cost incurred. Also briefly I'll compare EMAS with ISO 14001. Towards the end, I shall give you a simple case study before summarizing it and listing the references. Let's continue with introduction. Slide 7. EMAS, popularly termed as the Eco Management and Audit Scheme or also European Eco Management and Audit Scheme, is a voluntary initiative that has been designed for companies and organizations within the European Union. Developed in 1993 by the European Commission, we may hence consider it as an environmental management tool. EMAS has been operative since 1995. It basically enables organizations to assess, manage, and most importantly, continuously improve their environmental performance. Basically, the scheme is globally applicable and open to all types of private and public firms. If in case one needs to register with EMAS, then that particular organization must meet the requirements of the European Union EMAS regulation. Currently, more than 4,000 organizations and 7,000 sites are registered with EMAS. The basic objective of EMAS is continual improvement in the environmental performance of companies and firms. As a result, this empowers and allows organizations to evaluate, report, and improve environmental performance. The eventual outcome will be better management of environmental issues and also posting of credible information about these issues. As I told you, this comes within the framework of European Union. The European Commission is basically the executive arm of European Union itself. It has majorly 3 key roles. 1. To develop policy initiatives. 2. To enforce the European Union legislation. 3. To implement and manage the European Union policy. So basically, what does EMAS do? It actually enables organizations, companies, industries, enterprises within the European Union and the European Economic Area to seek certification for the environmental management systems, that is EMS. Originally, EMAS was confined only to industrial operations, but as a part of a wide-ranging revision of the regulation, which was adopted in March 2001, all sectors of economic activity have now been included. This regulation is now in its 3rd version and extends to all types of organizations. The amendments which has been embraced by EMAS 2 includes the following. First, the creation of an EMAS logo. Greater participation of employees in implementation of EMAS. Integration of ISO 14001 as the environmental management system required by EMAS, which makes it easier for companies to make transition from ISO to EMAS. Let me point out this information to you. Actually, EMAS is more stringent than ISO 14001. The current version of EMAS is EMAS 3, which was passed in 2009. To date, more than 3,000 sites have been awarded EMAS certification, and coincidentally, 2/3 of these are from Germany. With this brief introduction, let us move on to slide 8, which divulges core elements of EMAS. As you can see, there are 3 core elements: performance, credibility, transparency. Please remember, EMAS is the benchmark for premium environmental management systems. Let me explain to you about these core elements. Performance. Basically, we are referring to a continual improvement process wherein organizations will be committing themselves to continuously improve their environmental performance. Of course, this performance is also evaluated by a verifier. Now, this is achieved by fully complying with applicable environmental legislations, by involving employees and all stakeholders in order to benefit from their commitments, ideas, skills and experiences. The second element, credibility. This refers to the proper implementation of EMAS as assessed by a qualified and independent environmental verifiers. The third one, transparency. This refers to periodic reporting of the environmental performance of an organization. Of course, this report will include information on the key performance indicators, and yes, these reports have to be validated, must be validated by an environmental verifier. Organizations generally achieve greater transparency both externally through the environmental statement and internally through employees' active involvement. Having understood the 3 core elements of EMAS, it's time to have a glimpse of its structure. Let us now move on to slide 9. As you can see, it has 52 articles, 9 chapters and 8 annexures. Although EMAS is an official European Union regulation, it is binding only for organizations which voluntarily decide to implement the scheme. If you recollect, in slide 7, I had stressed upon the fact that EMAS is a voluntary initiative. Okay. Now, this EMAS regulation will include the EMS requirements of international standard for managing environmental concerns. Since, or rather if I put it across as, because of its additional requirements, therefore EMAS is also known as the premium instrument for environmental management. In order to register with EMAS, any organization must comply with certain implementation steps, and this is as per Article 4 of the EMAS regulation. And these implementation steps include environmental review, environmental policy, environmental management system, environmental auditing, environmental statement drafting, and finally verification and registration. Let us have a better understanding of what I was trying to express when I said that the steps towards implementing or registering with EMAS. Let us now look at slide 10. There are basically 10 steps or 10 stages for implementation of EMAS. These 10 steps are based on 4 key principles of plan, do, check, act. Let's move on to slide 11. As you can see, the first step is to gather useful information from a competent body. That is, if in case a particular organization or enterprise is interested in registering with EMAS, then the first thing to do is contact the local competent body who will help and provide with the customized technical support and other opportunities. Step 2. In this, we need to perform an environmental review of the organization. So, when we say an environmental review, it is basically an analysis of the environmental issues which is caused by the activities of the organization. To enhance this explanation, I may also state that these issues can be external, internal, which can positively and negatively affect the organization's EMS. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Step 3. So, this basically speaks about structuring the EMS by defining the environmental policy and an environmental program. Environmental policy is a public document which has to be prepared by the organization, which describes the commitment of the organization to the environment. It will specify the intentions of the organization in terms of its environmental performance. Environmental program is an action plan which will translate the organization's environmental policy into specific objectives. Let's now move on to step 4. This step speaks about implementing the environmental management system. For a given organization, the EMS may be informal in nature, but it must have a formal structure. Although the top management has to take accountability for the effectiveness of EMS, it must delegate appropriate tasks and responsibilities to individuals who work in the firm. This is for the system to operate well. Hence, it is imperative that all stakeholders are well involved. They are all aware of the duty and responsibility. Let's move on to the next step. Step 5. Here, the effectiveness of the EMS is to be checked through an internal environmental audit. That is, once the EMS has been implemented and is operational, it has to be monitored for the performance of the procedures and practices in terms of the environmental aspects. This can be achieved by carrying out an internal environmental audit, that is an EMS audit. Step 6. Aiming for continuous improvement in environmental performance. As organization's top management, the duty should be to periodically check the consistency of the organizational approach and its capability to meet the goals which have been stated in the policy document and the objectives that has been broken down into via the program. It is always considered as a good practice to carry out internal audit at the time of management review. Step 7. This deals with preparing the environmental report, also popularly called as environmental statement, that is Form 5. This is basically a concise document which effectively communicates the environmental performance to all stakeholders. It will outline the organization's achievement in terms of its objectives, detailing both past and present environmental actions and the success measured in terms of meeting the environmental targets. This report will also describe how an organization has taken into consideration the best practices for environmental management. Step 8. This is about getting the EMS verified and the environmental report being validated. Please note, the verification of EMS has to be carried out by a third party, an independent environmental verifier who has been licensed or is accredited by an EMAS accreditation body or a licensing body of a member state. This environmental verifier will examine and verify the conformity of the organization towards its environmental review, environmental policy and compliance with the legislations and regulations of the nation. It basically assesses and addresses whether the findings of the internal audit, the management review is correct and befitting the need for certification. The environmental verifier hence will validate the content of the environmental statement. The next step, step 9, this deals with registration, that is submitting the documents for registration to get the certification. Once the environmental report, that is your Form 5, have been formally verified and validated, the organization must send the documents to a competent body for applying for registration. Now, the documents basically includes the completed application form, which is Annexure 6 of the regulation, declaration, which is Annexure 7 of the regulation, and so forth. Let us now move on to the last step, step number 10, wherein the organization has to utilize or empower EMAS towards showing its environmental commitment to all the stakeholders. That is, the organization can now use the EMAS logo to promote its registration, to show its environmental commitment. This EMAS logo, which you have seen in the earlier slide, is an attractive visual communication to all external stakeholders as well. It is a marketing tool which explains or indicates or hints that so and so industry or organization is dedicated towards continuously improving its environmental performance. Nevertheless, moving beyond the concept of marketing branding, step number 10 basically empowers and enables the organization to continuously monitor the result, to look out for non-conformities, to ensure effective implementation of the environmental action plan, to ensure compliance with the environmental program, the environmental policy. Kindly note, any registration is valid for 3 years. That is, after 3 years, a particular organization or a company will have to apply once again for renewing the registration. So, what are the benefits of EMAS? Let us now move on to slide 12. As you can see in slide 12, there are a varied ranges of advantages that a company can gain by registering for EMAS. For instance, cost reduction, and this is definitely possible because of better management of resources, that is energy and natural resources. Risk minimization. Due to EMAS, there are possibilities to reduce the associated risks level by assessing the operational procedures. Regulatory compliance. Definitely, because there will be a greater awareness of regulatory requirements when the industry applies for EMAS registration. Regulatory relief. EMAS assists when regulators may choose to relax regulatory requirements. Improved relationship with stakeholders, that is internal and external. Say for internal, there would be bound employee involvement and training, which will definitely improve the morale of an employee. And in the case of external stakeholders, it can assist in enhancing credibility and transparency. Eventually, all these benefits leads to competitive market advantage. EMAS registration can lead to improved market access and definitely increased market share. So, finally, having said all this, we need to understand that the major advantage is enhanced environmental performance, that is high quality environmental management, high quality resource efficiency and cost savings. Talking of cost, let us also understand what are the different costs which is associated with EMAS registration. As you can see in the same slide, that is slide 12, I have listed 4 aspects. Let us look at them one by one. First and foremost, we must understand that the cost will definitely vary based on the size and the sector of the organization. Now let us move on to fixed cost. Fixed cost is basically assumed to be unrelated to the staff numbers, that is, it is not related to the registration fee or IT cost, but it basically deals with validation, verification fee. Okay. Now, let us move on to the next type, that is external cost. This is actually incurred by employing external consultancies which will support EMAS implementation, for instance, employee training or consultation charges. Now, please note, the external cost, even if it is not mandatory, it is often necessary. That is, for a company to achieve the EMAS registration, any or every company would go about hiring best hands or experts who can help the company towards achieving its EMAS registration. Let us go to the last one, internal costs. These are the costs which are incurred by organization staff while implementing, administering and reporting about EMAS. That means probably personal and technical resources which comes at a cost, which is needed for implementing, administering and reporting. Let us now move on to the next slide. Let me try to give you a simple overview or a comparison of EMAS and ISO 14001. If you recollect, I had made a statement that EMAS is more stringent than ISO 14001. Let us see how it is so. Slide 13. Now, the first statement is very clear. Whether it is ISO 14001 or EMAS, they share the same objective: better management of environmental resources, abatement of environmental pollution, in simple words, better environmental management. However, though EMAS and ISO 14001 share the same objective, they are still different in a number of ways. For instance, EMAS goes beyond the requirements of ISO 14001. While ISO 14001 requires an environmental performance in the management, it is not through a performance audit, but EMAS is wider and requires an evaluation of the environmental performance through a performance audit itself. While ISO 14001 requires periodic improvement without any defined frequency, EMAS specifies very clearly annual improvement. While in ISO 14001, initial review is recommended but not mandated, but in EMAS there is an obligatory preliminary review. That is the first time any organization sets its environmental status. Now, when you're talking about its status, yes, both of them are voluntary. Any organization which wants ISO 14001 certification or EMAS certification, it is voluntary to the organization itself. Let us be more specific. Within this, when it comes to ISO 14001, there are no legal basis. It is international. Okay, that is, it's a ISO standard under a private law. But when it comes to EMAS, it has a legal base, and that is very evidently the European Union. It comes under the regulation of the European Parliament and the Council under the public law. When you talk about the organizations, while ISO 14001 does not go towards entities or sites, EMAS, yes, the entity which has to be registered should not exceed the boundary of the member state, that is the European Union. Please remember, as ISO 14001 is an integral part of EMAS, automatically any organization will comply with the requirement which the international standard demands as well. Okay, having said all this, I would reiterate when I say that EMAS is more stringent than ISO 14001. Why? Because it has requirements beyond what ISO 14001 would demand towards its registrations, which means it is an additional requirement. Now, even if I have to concise this, let us take a simple example of environmental policy. ISO 14001 does not include any commitment to the continuous improvement of environmental performance. It only speaks about the performance of the system. However, EMAS includes commitment to the continual improvement of the environmental performance of the organization itself. This is a very simple statement which clearly stresses on how stringent or how improved EMAS is over ISO 14001. In simpler words, ISO 14001 is now a subset of EMAS. Having now understood the following aspects, that is, what exactly is EMAS? What does it stand for? What are the regulations that it has to oblige with? I am referring to basically companies. Okay, what exactly is it prepared for? What is the benefit? What are the costs associated with this? Who can participate in this? What are the 3 core elements? What are the 10 steps? And what are the 4 principles while implementing EMAS? Also, in the last slide, you understood why EMAS is better and stringent than ISO 14001. With all this background knowledge, primary knowledge, now let us understand the implication, application and significance when an organization has implemented EMAS in its firm, in its enterprise. That is, I am talking about a case study. Let us now move on to slide 14, wherein we shall discuss about BIFA. As you can see in slide 14, this case study basically deals with environmental management concept of a landfill facility. We are actually talking about Red Hill landfill facility, which is located in the open countryside bordering the southern outskirts of London. This facility, that is the waste disposal site, is basically owned and operated by BIFA. It is actually a part of the Severn Trent Water Utility Company. Now, this waste disposal site accepts or receives around 1,000 tons of waste each day from the nearby local authorities and from the local waste management companies. Now, what we need to understand here is Red Hill was basically an unlined dilute and dispersal landfill which covered about 65 hectares of former agricultural land. So the moment you say it is unlined, it definitely means that there are possibilities, there are definite chances that there could be contamination of the soil with the groundwater due to leachates. In fact, between 1954 and 1992, this terrain or this area was quarried for a mineral which is known as Fuller's earth. This mining operation actually left a void of around 10 million cubic meters, which of course partially got filled with water due to precipitation. Now, also, there were additional problems which started happening since this space was now used for landfill. And definitely you will always associate landfill with noise, that is vehicle movement, dust generation, epidemics, insects, rodents, pests and so forth. Now, having understood a basic information about the landfill facility, about the waste disposal site, about its operation, about the potential threat of this site for environment. Now let us understand the turnaround which happened since BIFA went for EMAS. The EMS which was put in place at Red Hill actually started placing greater emphasis on real-time monitoring. Okay, as a result of this, the water consumption had fallen down by 63%. Even the gas oil consumption had dropped by 35%. And it is obvious, you're talking about a landfill, which means there is generation of methane. The methane which was generated from this industry, that is the waste disposal site, was now actually being used to generate electricity. And due to this EMS in place, due to the process of EMAS, the percentage of methane gas which was being generated, it actually rose, drastically from 36% in 1996 to 80% in 1999, 3 years. Okay. Now, to date, all the waste which is disposed at a Red Hill site is now being placed over the natural water table, which means thanks to EMAS, there is relatively very negligible quantity of leachate which can enter into any water course. That is, there is negligible chances of soil pollution, groundwater contamination. I hope all of you have understood the real worth or application or implication or benefit or significance when an organization implements EMAS. Now, not just the environmental management improved, BIFA also recorded a great profit. In fact, in 2001, it had recorded a turnover of 396 million euros. Okay. Now, with this, BIFA has now become the leading integrated waste management enterprise in United Kingdom. I sincerely hope that all of you have understood the concept of EMAS, and with the case study, your understanding should have enhanced. Now let us move on to the next slide, wherein I shall be summarizing whatever we have learned till now. Slide 15. So you are very well aware that we are dealing with European Union regulation. EMAS is a voluntary initiative any company and organization can take up. Eventually, if they take up, there will be a process in place for evaluation, reporting and continual improvement. EMAS itself, which was developed in 1993 and became operational in 1995, has undergone amendments, and the current amendment stands with EMAS 3. How has EMAS helped? Better management of environmental issues, credible information available on issues, okay, and better marketing, branding value for a company which takes up EMAS. To conclude, if you or rather I would say an organization wishes to go for EMAS, the stages would include drafting environmental policy, reviewing the system which is there, that is operational system in the industry, implementing an environmental management system, carrying out an internal audit, that is EMS audit, preparing an environmental statement which is Form 5, which compares your performance, environmental performance, resource utilization performance with respect to the past year and the present year, and finally applying for registration with a competent local body, and upon being successful, the utilization of EMAS logo on the company website or any of its product. Slide 16. These are the references which I have used while preparing this presentation. I would request all of you and welcome all of you to go through this and enhance the knowledge beyond the scope of this presentation. Slide 17. In next session, we shall discuss about ISO 14001. This is Dr. Rajesh Gopinath signing off. Thank you.